In the heart of Lagos, St. Raphael Memorial Hospital burst with life, a place of healing. Yet, shrouded in rumors, there was one door that remained untouched. Unspoken of Ward 39, staff avoided it. Patients never asked, but on her first night shift, B, a 25-year-old nurse with fire in her curiosity and purpose in her steps, noticed what others ignored. The light outside Ward 39 flickered like a dying breath. A dusty, forgotten file lay on the floor, its pages whispering something the living chose to forget. Bee's instincts pulled her closer to the door no one dared open. With her heart pounding in her chest, Dee carefully opened the creaking door to Ward 39. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of an overhead light flickering in the corner. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something darker, something more ominous. As she stepped inside, her eyes immediately landed on a disheveled patient lying on a bed in the far corner. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his hands trembled uncontrollably. The air was thick with silence, the kind that felt too heavy to bear. He turned his head toward her, his eyes wide and fearful. "They won't let you leave if you stay here," he whispered hoarsely. She could feel the weight of the man's words as they echoed in her mind. The ward, a place meant to heal, felt more like a prison. Despite her professional calm, a chill crept down her spine. She knew there was something wrong in this place, something more than the neglected patients and the sterile smell. Turning to leave, she heard a soft rustle in the corner of the room. She glanced over her shoulder, but there was nothing, only the shadows. Her breath quickened, but she stayed rooted to the spot. That's when she heard it. A voice, barely a whisper, coming from the farthest corner of the room. Bee's heart raced as she stepped away from the corner where she heard the voice. Her mind turned with thoughts of what she had just witnessed. She glanced at the door, contemplating leaving, but she knew something deep within her told her that this was only the beginning of a much darker truth that the hospital hid. Her instinct screamed at her to run, but her duty as a nurse kept her rooted. She couldn't let the unknown haunt her forever. With a deep breath, she approached the patient's bed, determined to get answers she wasn't sure she was ready for. Bee stood frozen, the patient's haunting words echoing in her mind. She had expected a shift full of rounds, not riddles. Her instincts battled, her training curiosity clashed with caution. The patient's warning gnawed at her, but so did the reality of her job. What secrets did this hospital bury behind its whitewashed walls and carefully worded protocols? She turned to leave, but paused at the door. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Was this the face of someone ready to stand up against the system, or just another nurse too scared to speak? As Bee re-entered the room, the patient's eyes glinted with something more than mere illness. There was knowledge hidden beneath the frail exterior. The air seemed heavier, thick with unspoken truths. "You don't know everything about this place," the patient whispered again, the rasp of her voice barely audible above the hum of machines. Bee's heart raced. She knew the hospital had its secrets, but this was something more, something that felt far too personal. The patient then shot out, grabbing Bee's arm with surprising strength. "Trust no one," the woman gasped. "Not even your own kind." Bee flinched, but there was no time for further contemplation. She had to know more. Bee's thoughts swirled in confusion and fear as she left the room. The hospital, once a place of healing, now felt like a prison. The hallways echoed with whispers, both real and imagined. There was a growing sense of unease within her, but she couldn't put her finger on why. Just as she rounded a corner, she caught a glimpse of V, her colleague, at the end of the corridor. He was talking to a nurse in a hushed voice, his usual calm demeanor replaced by an air of urgency. His expression softened when he saw her, but it didn't reach his eyes. "B, we need to talk," V said, his tone low, almost too careful. B stood before V, the silence between them growing heavy. She wanted to speak, to ask what was going on, but something held her back. V broke the silence first, his voice low and urgent. "B, there's something you need to know. The hospital is hiding something. Something dangerous." His words struck like a thunderclap, and Bee felt a chill run through her spine. As he spoke, his eyes darted around the hallway, as if searching for someone. He leaned in closer to her. "It's the infection, Bee. It's not just HIV. It's spreading faster than they've told anyone, and it's linked to the carelessness of the hospital staff." Bee's heart sank, the weight of his words sinking in. The hidden truth was darker than she could have imagined. Later that night, Bee slipped into the hospital's record room. Her heart thudded as she flipped through patient files, cases of infection that were never documented, test results altered, and reports marked confidential in bold red ink. She realized the situation was more than a careless oversight, it was deliberate. A noise startled her. She turned to find Dr. Harlem standing in the shadows. The senior doctor's eyes were sharp and unreadable. "You've seen too much, B," she said softly. "But what would you do with it?" B tightened her grip on the file, her mind spinning. This wasn't just a health crisis, it was a war for truth. B left the record room shaken, but she knew she couldn't back down now. As she stepped into the long hospital corridor, her thoughts were racing. Suddenly, a janitor quietly approached her, someone she had barely noticed before. He glanced around and whispered, "You are not crazy, Nurse B. People have tried to expose it before. They vanished." Before she could respond, he disappeared into a service door, leaving her in stunned silence. The hallway lights flickered above her, and the silence that followed felt like a warning wrapped in fear. Bee's heart pounded as she entered the doctor's lounge, a place once warm with idle chatter now felt like a pressure cooker. Inside, Dr. Fowler and Dr. Nenna were mid-discussion, their tones sharp and clipped. Bee's entrance silenced them. She could feel the weight of unspoken truths swirling around her like smoke. Dr. Fowler's eyes lingered on the file in Bee's hand. "You've seen too much, Nurse B," he said quietly. Dr. Nenna didn't speak. Her face was unreadable, but her gaze flicked to the door like she expected it to burst open at any moment. Later that evening, Bee followed a paper trail that led her to an old, sealed corridor, one long forgotten behind rusted filing cabinets in the basement. The air grew colder, heavier. At the end of the corridor, she found a hidden room with a broken access keypad and a faded sign that once read, "Psych Ward Restricted." Inside, the room was cluttered with files, peeling posters about HIV awareness, and dusty medical equipment. But what caught Bee's eyes were the records patients misdiagnosed. Some disappeared entirely from the system. Her fingers trembled as she uncovered evidence that linked mental health cases to missing HIV files. She barely heard the quiet footsteps behind her. Bee's breath caught in her throat. She spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, but there was no one. The silence that followed was louder than a scream. As she steadied her breathing, she picked up a dusty manila folder labeled "Patient 047 HIV plus psychosis transferred, no clearance." Inside were photos, faces she had seen in the waiting room, real people, written off as mentally unstable, denied treatment, and hidden away from the public eye. Her hands shook as she flipped through page after page of cover-ups, all signed by top hospital staff. Then she heard it again, footsteps, this time clearer and closer. She backed slowly toward the exit, clutching the file to her chest, but just before she reached the hallway, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Mama Efi, the elderly janitor who had always seemed to linger where no one paid attention. "You shouldn't be here, nurse," Mama Efi whispered, eyes darting around nervously. "Some truths are buried for a reason." He froze. "You knew about this?" Mama Efi nodded solemnly. "I've cleaned the blood, packed the bodies, kept quiet. But maybe it's time someone spoke up." The hospital's morning sun spilled through the broken blinds, illuminating the reception where a crowd had gathered. Bee stood at the center, her voice trembling but resolute as she read from the confidential file. Names, dates, deaths, cover-ups. Mama Efi stood beside her, nodding in support. Reporters had arrived. Health officials followed shortly. What began as a quiet suspicion had become a roar. The hospital's hidden truths, its ignored hygiene practices, the silent suffering of mental health patients, and the cruel stigma faced by HIV-positive patients had been exposed. Though fear clung to her bones, Bee knew this was the beginning of a new story, one where silence could no longer protect injustice.